Hello, everybody. I am Nate Sweet, and this is the Casual Cognition Podcast. Wow, Hank and I are just so excited to have this out, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you here listening with us. We're going to try and have this out every 2 weeks, and we've got some really great guests coming up, great conversations. We think you're really going to enjoy it. We're not going to be having any ads or monetization right now. So if you want to support us, just give us a nice rating on whatever you're listening on. That'll be plenty for now. And before we jump into the podcast, I just wanted to give a quick heads up. We recorded this right in the middle of the mass protests in the United States over the murder of George Floyd. And normally we're going to try to avoid getting into political things and current events, but this event was just so momentous that we felt like we needed to discuss it on the podcast. And so if you're really exhausted from hearing about all these things, we do get past about 20 minutes in and we get into things that are going to be a little bit more typical of our normal podcast. So with all that being said, let's get into the podcast, and thank you so much for listening. All right, buddy. Here we go. How you doing today, Hank?
I'm having a great day so far. How about you? I know it's just starting, but
so far my day has only included talking to you, so it's been fantastic. I feel like a disc jockey, old school disc jockey. I got my coffee and I'm in my recording studio, aka my closet.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so having a good day so far. So, we're just going to go ahead and jump into this thing.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
We're going to talk a little bit today about the thing that's on everybody's mind. And we're going to try to avoid getting into the politics of the moment, because we are not a politics show. There's plenty of great shows out there for that, and it's just not us. We're going to have a little bit of a meta conversation about the social movements that are going on right now in America. And specifically, I want to take the angle of if and where violence has a place in these social movements. Because, it's really easy for people to say, oh, well, Gandhi did it. Gandhi took India without any violence, and Martin Luther King was nonviolent. And there is examples of it, but we ain't Gandhi and this ain't India. And Martin Luther King was murdered for his peaceful protest, even though it worked. But there was a lot of violence that went along in that period too. So I think it's a little disingenuous for people to just say violence is never the answer. I hate that phrase. I'm like, that's nonsense. Violence has to be the answer sometimes. You're not gonna stop Hitler with peaceful protesting. And I'm not saying that, the violence that's going on right now is acceptable, but I think that we need to have a conversation about when it's appropriate to start burning shit down. Maybe that's a little strong, but when is it appropriate to lash out in a way that is more extreme? When does peaceful protest end and violent protest begin or become necessary?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, I think it was actually a JFK quote that I'm going to butcher, but something along the lines of, those who make peaceful revolution impossible
make violent revolution inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And
that's a good one.
I don't know. It's an interesting question because, there's kind of this. It's probably a pretty polarizing topic that we're kind of getting into here. There's a lot of people kind of on one end of the spectrum, which is, pacifism, which is in depending on how it's kind of manifest and how it's utilized, it can just be like passive, like just do nothing, or there's another element to it, which is, doing something with doing the thing that you want to do without inciting violence and without causing any pain to other people, like doing it in a peaceful way. And I don't know, for me, this is a very difficult question to answer, and I can only really look back historically at what has worked. And I know, there's some very obvious examples of how going the peaceful route may actually be the most powerful way to move forward. I know you mentioned King and Gandhi. Also, Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, like later in their lives. And, if we look at apartheid and we look at what was going on in South Africa, during that time, by all metrics, that should have been a fucking bloodbath. That should have been just chaos and murder, and just that was not going to be good for anybody. That was going to be a horrific period of time. And it was obviously leading up to that. There's a lot of social unrest and a lot of suffering and a lot of pain that had to be endured. But it seemed like by going the peaceful route, it led to the best possible solution for the preconditions and what had been going on during that time.
Yeah. And, before I keep going, I'm not trying to take the side of, we need to start fucking shit up. I'm not saying that. But I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. One thing that I was thinking about is that, the recent protests were sparked by the murder of George Floyd. And I remember doing a presentation in high school on police brutality. And it was going on back then. I had plenty of examples of extrajudicial killings by police officers, and almost every single one of them is followed by peaceful protests, especially the high-profile ones, ones like Eric Garner and Philando Castile. And it didn't really... none of those guys got charged, even.
Yeah.
It seems like it took this level of extreme outcry to get things done. Right. And maybe it's also, there's other factors besides that. It's also just a simple fact that there's multiple camera angles. That photo will probably be in textbooks in the future of Derek Chauvin kneeling on his neck. And, it's so hard to create any spin out of the situation. So there's a lot of factors that go into why this is kind of a perfect storm for things to actually happen. But,
it's also, in some ways, it's, sorry to interrupt you, but it's,
no, you're fine.
It's, it's an outlet as well for, there's so much frustration and there's so much stress and there's so much survival going on right now. People's livelihoods are being basically just erased, and they're already a lot of times struggling to kind of make ends meet, and that's already bad enough, and then some shit like this happens and it's like, dude, just stop. Please, just fucking stop and do your job. Oh man, I'm trying to keep myself from getting too excited here because we've had a lot of really unpleasant interactions with police officers growing up in a small town. We grew up in Sedona, and these people are, they're well-meaning, they're trying to be good people, but like they're just so traumatized and ignorant, and of course I can't say this about all police officers, like that's completely ridiculous, but this is just like from my perspective, a lot of the police officers that I've interacted with in this small town, it's very different because there's not real crime. There's kids running around, egging houses every once in a while, or like throwing toilet paper, or like drinking sometimes, and like that's all they have to work with. So that, if you want to feel important and you want to feel powerful, the best way to do that is to shit on rebellious young kids. I know this is kind of like
and
a
if you don't have
thing.
any black ones around, you'll settle for white ones.
Yeah, exactly. And I know this is kind of a
there's
separate
definitely
thing,
a preference level there.
Yeah, and it's so I just am pointing that out because that's part of the reason why I'm I'm trying to curb my enthusiasm.
Got a little bad memories coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
Hank one time had actually maybe you should tell this to him. One time had an airsoft gun and had a squad of police officers come up to him with assault rifles.
Dude, it wasn't even an airsoft gun. It was literally a toy pirate gun, like a fucking flintlock toy.
God, I didn't even know that. I didn't realize it was a fucking pirate pistol.
Yeah, it was literally a pirate gun. I was like leaning out of the window of my buddy's car and just like, yarg!
What am I gonna do? Shoot you with an antique musket pistol?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's gonna take me 30 minutes to load it.
Yeah, and this is the thing, so I'm getting super worked up about this, right? And that was, I went to a juvenile detention center for a night in maximum security cell because of that. But the thing is people are getting fucking killed out
John,
there.
I've never dealt with a pirate before.
Yeah, I mean, you joke, but like, dude, people are getting fucking murdered out here in the streets.
And, if you were a black kid and they had just shot you and killed you, every single, I shouldn't say every single, but there would be tons of people out there saying, well, he shouldn't have been waving that thing around. It could have been a weapon. People would justify that is plenty of reason, or a lot of people would, for a cop to murder a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have, and they've used less. They've said that there's cell phones and stuff, and it's just, you talked about them being traumatized and them being ignorant. They're also undertrained,
and that's I think the main issue here. Like it's easy to blame like the police officers themselves, and of course the guy who is doing this egregious crime, is committing this crime, is responsible, absolutely, but it's also the system that is in place that gets these guys weaponized and gives them the tools to hold the peace, or like, because they're there to protect us. And for me, especially when I was younger, every time I saw a police officer, I actually felt more unsafe. Like I
still feel that way.
Yeah, and it's different for me now because I'm living in Sweden, and the police officers here are super well trained, and they're like way more on the end of pacifism. Like violence is the absolute last resort. And
do they even carry around? Your normal beat cops carry around guns?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, dude, it's completely unnecessary. I mean, of course, there's areas, you can't just, you can't just like have guns. You can't just have fucking M4s and shotguns, and you can't have assault rifles and shit over here. So, it's not necessary. They're trained in hand-to-hand combat. They have some different tools that they can use.
I'm sure they've got tasers and mace and stuff like that.
Dude, even that, dude, mace is illegal here.
Really?
Mace is illegal here. It's
Dude.
way over the top. It's way, way over the top.
Meanwhile, I don't know if you remember this, but there was this famous thing that went around that, man, it really upset me, where there's these kids who are peacefully protesting by literally sitting on the ground, and this cop walks up and just douses them with mace as they're sitting there. And he's just casually walking down the line, just spraying them down like he's spraying a fucking weed on the side of the road.
Makes me sick, man.
It was horrifying. Yeah.
So, and that kind of brings us.
Stop.
It brings us back to kind of this initial thing, like. It's so hard because when you're met with violence, like from the people who are supposed to be protecting us, like you want to fight back. You want to go, dude, fuck you. Like, we're not going to stand for this shit. But the thing is like the more that we, at least this is my view, like the more that we fight and destroy and just like if we go that route, it's literally the effect of that will be weaponizing the police officers even further. They're going to get more riot gear. They're going to get more rubber bullets. They're going to get more fucking tear gas. And they're just going to become more dangerous. They're not going to feel safe. The people aren't going to feel safe. It's just, dude, it's fucking... It's really tough.
Did you see some of the pictures of what the police are dressed in? They look like something out of Warhammer 40K. They've got like these pauldrons and like
Jesus Christ,
like the shields. They're not even like the riot shields. They're like round bucklers, and they're standing up, and they literally look like something out of like a dystopian sci-fi, or even like some kind of like medieval soldiers. Like they look like they're about to go and start chopping heads off. It's crazy looking.
Insane, man.
I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
And so, getting back to the topic, I understand the anger and I understand why people would be enraged. So, while I don't think I could bring myself to go the violent route, I also can't really condemn people for doing that. And that being said, one thing I do want to add is that the overwhelming majority of the people who are involved in these things aren't violent. And actually a majority of the people who are causing violence aren't involved with the movements and oftentimes are actually paid agitators. There's been more than one police officer caught doing this and somebody who is, paid to try to incite looting.
Wow.
So there's actual evidence of this happening. So
I would love to see that. I wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, no, I'll send you some stuff after this.
Maybe we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Although a simple Google search will bring up a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But so it's only a very small minority of people who are actually doing any kind of violence. But one of the reasons for that is that the protesters all know that as soon as somebody breaks a window, as soon as somebody throws a Molotov cocktail, as soon as somebody lights a dumpster on fire, that is
that's the cue.
Yeah, that is the cue that, oh, these people are bad people, these people are rioters. A certain unnameable will start talking about shooting them. I don't know. You probably didn't even hear about that.
No, I don't know if I want to know.
You probably don't, but I'm gonna tell you anyway.
That's why Trump I love having you in my life, Nate.
Trump ended one of his recent tweets with "When the looting starts, the shooting starts."
Jesus, dude.
Yeah, and so that's exactly what we're talking about. It's like the protesters have to self-regulate, because as soon as somebody is even in their orbit and starts to become violent, then all of them are painted with the same brush, and that's bullshit.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is a this topic is it's a pretty tough one. You know, it is
a tough one. Sorry, guys. Normally our topics are going to be a little bit more lighthearted than this, but
Yeah.
I felt like we just had to address this. I would feel disingenuous if we didn't bring this up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm glad you point that out because, you know, this kind of conversation, it's not the anchor point of the podcast. It's not what we're mainly going to be focusing on, but I think it is important to allow for these kinds of conversations. And it would be super interesting to me to hear for you guys listening, like, what do you think about this? I know we just kind of talked about it a little bit. We haven't really come to any final conclusions on the matter, but yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what other people think.
I actually kind of want to avoid coming up with major conclusions on this kind of stuff because
yeah, definitely.
I just want to have conversations. You know, this is a casual podcast, even though this didn't seem so casual. But like I said, we'll tone it down a little bit. But I want people to just, you know, think for themselves. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, and we're going to try to avoid doing that on this podcast. But you know, conversations need to be had, and I think that that's probably the biggest positive that's coming out of all this is that people are forcing the conversation now, and people are having the conversation. I mean, everybody I talk to, it's almost like the virus, you know. Everybody I talk to for a while, it's like, hey, how you doing with the thing? And then, you know, now it's the same thing. Hey, what do you think? What do you think about what's going on? I don't even have to say what it is. People know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
So the conversation is being had, and I think that's a good sign. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, maybe a little segue here. So, you know, it's really easy for us to become consumed by these different global events that are happening. We're in the midst of a pandemic. There's looting, rioting in the streets. There's a lot of social unrest. There's economic issues. And it's super, super easy to kind of hyper focus on these things and kind of forgetting about balancing our own lives. So another thing that I wanted to talk about today with you was this kind of balancing act that we all go through when it comes to balancing out, you know, productivity, creativity, and self-love, man. Like, and I guess I'll just start just with some thoughts to bounce off with you, because I notice, like, for me, for example, if I'm super focused on like, oh, I need to be productive, I need to like create things, I need to, you know, make it happen, and, you know, I kind of forget about like, oh, but I also need to just accept myself the way that I am and give myself time to reflect and time to be in silence and time to just nurture my own well-being. So what do you think about that? Like, do you have any strategies around that, or do you just have any general ideas that you would like to express?
Well, to tie into what we were just talking about, I've had to take a little break from the news lately, man. I'm normally a big time news guy. I mean, I'm always reading articles, and it normally doesn't bother me so much. The normal everyday political bullshit I can get past, but like between the virus and now this, I've had to sign off a little bit, because it's like, all right, I've already absorbed a lot about it. I know what's going on, but every article right now is about the virus, and every article right now is about the protests, and, you know, at a certain point, I had to just say, all right, enough is enough. You know, I'm doing my part in my own way. I don't need to just absorb all this negative information all the time. I already understand what's going on. There's no new shit that's coming out that I won't hear about. But like I've got a couple of news podcasts that I just took off my feed because I didn't want to keep seeing them pop up every morning.
Yeah.
And haven't really been going into my news app. And you know, it feels good. I get a little, I don't know, sometimes it makes me feel a little weird because I've kept up with current events since I was like, you know, for probably 12 years now. So not keeping up with current events, it feels a little strange. But at the same time, anytime I open up my news app, I'm like, oh, there's no more current events. I'm still current.
Yeah.
Nothing new.
It's just the cycling.
The world's still on fire.
The same stuff, just like fear and, yeah. I think that's really intelligent
with the
of you.
exception of Fox News, which in these sort of situations tries to just completely ignore. Every time I see a headline on Fox News, I sent Bo like 3 different ones because I thought they were so funny. It was like coronavirus, protests, looting, and then the Fox News one was like woman divorces husband because her mother-in-law moved in next door. It was like the most asinine bullshit.
Yeah, and so I guess kind of I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like the point that you're kind of making is like, or yeah, you know, being tuned into these like news vibes, which very much thrive on, you know, creating this kind of fever pitch of like panic and neurosis, is just totally like that. It's so easy for that to just throw you off of your game and throw you off of your center and like what matters to you as an individual, and really, you know, keeping that as the main focus rather than externalizing all of our issues and challenges that we're dealing with and projecting those externally onto like these different events that are happening globally.
Yeah, to simplify it, I would just say it's important to regulate your input. And that's not just the media you're consuming. It's also what kind of friends you're around. You know, some friends I like and I'm cool to hang around with them, but I can't hang around with them all the time. And that's an obvious, you know, everybody's got those kind of people where it's like, yeah, you know, he's good in small doses, or, you know, but I think that there's a lot of things in life that we can just sort of take for granted that like, oh, that's a part of my life. And really, you can either take a break from it or you can just drop it all together, and it's not going to make that much of a difference. My perfect example of that is a few years back, I just decided to delete my Facebook because I never used it that much, and I noticed one day that I just got on to check it, and the act of signing in was like giving me anxiety because I knew that I hadn't been on a little while, and I knew that I was going to have like 87 new messages and a bunch of new friend requests and stuff, and then I feel obligated to respond to people.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, fuck it, dude. I'm getting off of here.
I'm out.
And I actually had to like message Facebook and give them reasons why I was getting off. They wouldn't let me just delete my account. It was kind of creepy.
Wow. That is creepy.
But yeah, that was just an unnecessary thing that I could just drop. No need.
Yeah.
And I've since pretty much done that with all the social media networks except for Reddit.
Yeah, but I want to just go back to something you said, which really ties into this topic. You talked about like regulating your inputs, right? So if we're talking about balancing, we'll just take a chunk of this idea and balancing like productivity and creativity, right? Another way There's also like, there's another kind of spectrum or a dimension, which is like, and we've talked about this a lot, but from production and consumption, right? So, and to me, like balancing that out is a huge part, because on that dimension we have production and consumption, but there's like another axis on production, which is like productive things and creative things, but it's still like producing or creating some kind of
I get what you're
content
saying.
or something. So, but I've found, and I think this is kind of what we're figuring out as a species, is like when we just engage in consumption only, it creates a kind of like momentum, and for me, it honestly creates this kind of numbness. Like I become desensitized because I'm just, if I'm getting stimulus all the time, I become completely desensitized. And then if I go and I want to create something, it takes time to connect with my sensitivity and my, this kind of like awareness and intelligence that goes beyond thought and analysis and, just like passive consumption. And so I think, and that's exactly what you were talking about. Like, so one of the things for you, even though maybe you weren't using it that much, like was Facebook. Like, okay, this is a stimulus that like there are positive aspects to it, but the way that I am interacting and interfacing with it is not serving me. I had the same thing with Reddit, dude. I used to love Reddit. I would spend hours every time I wouldn't have anything to do. I would go on Reddit and I would just surf the interwebs, dude. just go to my favorite subreddits. I had subscribed to all the different places, and like there's a lot of great content on there. There's a lot of great stuff. But at the end of the day, like it was infringing on my silence and my space and my production and my creativity and as a human being, which for me is way more important. Obviously, we need to consume certain things to survive. We need food, we need water, all of these kind of things. And we can learn a lot by choosing the right mediums to consume information from, the people that we respect, the people we want to learn from. That's all amazing. But I really want to encourage people to like find the thing that you can create that's unique, that gives you a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and that you can have fun with. And that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast. We've been talking for years, man. And like, why not create something that we can share with the world and that we can all benefit from and have a fun time and learn together, and just spreading this forgive my my rant and my delving a little bit into the woo-woo, but just spreading the fucking good vibes and spreading these ideas that we can all benefit from and, grow together through thinking about and sharing.
Yeah. And another thing that I found myself a little resistant on initially making the podcast was that, there's just so many podcasts out there. We don't really need to have another podcast. But at the same time, Duncan Trussell had a great line about this. He's like, are you not going to make a painting on a canvas because there's already too many painted canvases out there? It's like, why not just put another thing in there? If we get a few listeners, wonderful. If we don't get any, that's fine. I mean, I've already I've given our demos to some friends, and they enjoy it. And I think that there's too much like why and not enough why not whenever, at least in my approach to creativity. And some of my best stuff is just come out when I just have not thought about it at all.
Dude, that is
And
such
just rolled.
that is such a good point, dude. I really want to dive in with that because that is something that I've been thinking about a lot, paradoxically, because obviously the idea is that thinking is actually a barrier to pure creative expression, in my understanding. This is the thing, is there's a lot of thinking and a lot of analysis and a lot of practice and learning and discipline and all of these things that go into building up the skill set to creating and assembling the toolbox with which we can express ourselves through in a creative expression, in some kind of art form. But when it comes down to the act of expression, like for me, I have found that thinking is completely just, it takes me away from the feeling, it takes me away from the moment, and it becomes a barrier between myself, my expression, and just connecting to the muse.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've found that going back to what you're talking about, if I'm just too cluttered, my creativity doesn't come. It gets all stopped up. And one of the ways it can get cluttered is thinking about it too much.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about what I'm going to do too much, thinking of planning it out too much, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of ways that I can get cluttered up. I thought that my creativity would be really high during the pandemic because I'd have more time at home and I'd have less to do. Turns out all the negativity and frustration that came out from it just blocked me up completely, and I didn't hardly do anything. Now, I didn't really get any time off. I've still been working because I'm essential. But, there's so much that goes into creative output that is not even in the actual output itself. It's just in the lead up. It's just trying to get your ass to the chair.
Yeah, dude, showing up, man.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of thing as the gym or the yoga mat or whatever, the meditation cushion. The hardest thing is dragging yourself to the spot.
Yeah.
And doing it.
And it's also, that's another thing. It kind of goes back to this idea that we talk about a lot, which is, process versus goal oriented. But like the important thing there is showing up. It doesn't really matter what the what the output is, what the result is. That is actually unimportant, especially when it comes to like, progression in a skill or things like that, because it's also, there is a balancing act there of like, balancing, because we can use the analysis and we can use the logic to aid in our progression, like, because when I think about like for me, it's music. That's my like main creative expression. And, I could just noodle around all day. But also, you know what? Because I was going to say like that can end up just like not really going anywhere. But there's another element to it, which is like the awareness and the intention, right? So I don't necessarily, like, it's different to be noodling, but not really being like fully focused on it, like just kind of doing the same thing that I always do. I have these little licks that I like doing, and even that, like, that can be helpful to a degree, but there's also this other still practicing. But there's kind of another element to it, which is like there's a yearning for myself to become more able to express my emotions, thoughts, concepts, ideas, personality, whatever, through music. And there are a lot of like tools that we can use logically, in that long-term progression. But then when it comes to just like pure creation, we kind of need to just drop all of those structural concepts and ideas and just like flow. And that's where the most beautiful stuff that I've ever created comes out from those moments. And then it's like, wait a minute, that wasn't even me. Like that was that. And for people who haven't explored art, like it's kind of hard to understand, but like I hear this again and again and again from all of our many of my favorite artists say the same thing. And it's just like, I mean, I was involved in this, like I was kind of the filter or like the antenna which tuned into these frequencies, but like, you almost can't like be like, yeah, that was me. I made
all
that.
All art is collaboration, whether you're doing it alone or not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just amazing. Like, brings me to a quote which I love, which I think is, I love this quote. We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So even if I think like, oh yeah, I made this myself, like I'm super cool and I have so many good ideas, but actually even without this whole thing of the muse and all of this stuff, it's like, well, I've actually been influenced by hundreds of different artists that I've listened to throughout my life and different styles that I was like, wow, that is beautiful. And taking these little pieces and kind of incorporating them into my expression. And so even if like with that alone, it's already like that, like I didn't do this. This is part of a lineage. This is part of a amalgamation of creative influence and energy that has turned into this like unique expression.
Yeah, not to mention the instruments you're playing are created by someone else. The recording equipment you're recording on is designed by someone else and created by something else, probably a robot. But so there's another quote that I like that's in that same vein is that there's no such thing as a self-made man. And that is a big cultural myth in America, that you can be a self-made man and that's what we should all aspire to be. And that concept is just complete bullshit. Nobody has ever been a self-made man. It doesn't exist. You can't do that. That's not how humans are meant to live, and that's not how we're capable of living.
I mean, that's a sad existence, man.
Yeah, that sucks. Like that's another. Who wants to be a self-made man? That sounds so douchey
like,
and boring.
I'm completely alone in this, and I am just doing everything by myself all the time and don't need any help from anybody. I don't need it. I'm so like, big man.
You ever see the movie The Jerk?
No.
It's a classic Steve Martin movie. It really blew my mind when I saw it because it's old and I thought it was going to be like
just shitty.
We'll just leave it to Beaver, innocent. But there's a lot of like crude language and sexual content and stuff. And Steve Martin is plays he might get in trouble for doing this one day because the guy seems like he's kind of mentally challenged in the show, but he's just like super dumb. And
like a Mr. Bean kind of guy, or not quite to that.
Even dumber. Dumber.
Oh man. That's.
And he just kind of bumbles into success.
It's kind of like a Don Quixote kind of character.
And the funny part about it is that he ends up losing it all. Or I shouldn't say the funny part about it. The funny part that I was going to bring up. He loses all his money and his wife divorces him and stuff. And he's walking out of the house in his bathrobe and he goes, "I don't need you. I don't need anybody. And then he goes on this like little bit that became pretty famous. He's like, I just need this thermos and this chair and this lamp. That's all I need. Just the thermos, the chair, and the lamp, and this thing here too. That's all I need. And he just like keeps on going as he's walking out. He keeps on grabbing random shit on the way out and saying, "This is all I need."
Wow, that's actually beautiful because it's kind of pointing to like the flaw, or like, you know, this thing about the materialistic mindset, and how, you know, he's going through this period of like deep pain, and he's just like, oh, these material objects will like, these will soothe me, like this is all I need to be okay. And it's just like totally, you know, repressing or like those emotions of like, wow, my entire life is gonna be completely changed, like and just the loss and that whole element to
You're
it.
probably reading a little bit too deep into The Jerk, but
Probably, but like that's the beauty of good art, dude, is like, you know, it's the way that we view it and our perspective on it. Like, it's, I don't get to choose what you think my song is about. And I don't want to. I want to hear your interpretation of it, because it could be completely different from mine.
yeah, and that goes back into the collaboration. Like, maybe I had an intention for this, but it came out with its own intention.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff like that that's been completely misinterpreted by the people who've absorbed the art than what the artist had in mind. Real quick before we get on, I gotta have one more great thing from The Jerk.
Okay.
He doesn't know how to be rich, and so he's walking these people past, and he goes, "Wine cooler?" And they look over, and there's two like the water coolers in an office. One's filled with white wine, and one's filled with red wine. I thought that was a genius line, dude. Fucking Steve Martin is a treasure.
Yeah, can
But
definitely agree.
Moving on from that. You know, I find that the one strange thing about this concept is that I've done a painting. I paint, y'all. That's my art mainly. And I've done a painting and thought it turned out really, really good, and tried to do something similar, not like recreate the painting, but it was kind of made in that flow state
Yeah.
that you were talking about. I had no plans for it. I jokingly say to people who ask me how I did that one, I'm like, accidentally. And it's probably my best painting. And I've tried to redo it, and I just can't do it. I can't make it the way I did it that time. And I've given up trying to redo it, and that's its own thing. But I can't remake whatever was coming through me in that moment. I can try, but I can get kind of close, but it's not the same. There's something about that painting that was magical.
Yeah,
And it's almost every single across the board, people say that one's my favorite.
I love that you bring up flow states here, because one way that I could interpret what you just shared with me was like, okay, like, so you can't recreate this thing that you engaged in the creation of, we'll say. And you also mentioned flow states, and the thing about flow, I think that's such an interesting concept, the state of flow. And one of the things about flow is like, one of the triggers, it's kind of like flow is triggered when we have this perfect balance of, it's this intense, full awareness focus on a thing that has like very clear rules, so it's obvious if we are succeeding or failing. So like that's why sports, for example, can induce flow states. Like it's very clear what the rules are. Or like a painting, like there's a canvas and you put the paint on it. You know, it could be like something as simple as that, but there's also this element of like being right just beyond what your skill level is. So if something's too easy, you get bored. You can think about other stuff. You're thinking. You're just thinking. You're not in flow, right? If it's too difficult, you get frustrated. You keep failing. You're like, "Fuck, this is so hard. Like I can't do this." But if it's right at the precipice of like what we can actually achieve, or ideally actually just beyond that, that is something that throws us, that has the potential to throw us into these states of flow. And that's maybe, you know, because where you were at that time, you know, maybe this piece, like maybe it was like beyond what you thought you were capable of, or
it definitely was.
Exactly.
Like,
so
I was using random techniques that I had never used before and don't even really know how I did in the moment.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of flow, is like you kind of lose your like self-consciousness in a way. Like you're aware. It's almost like when you kind of meld and become the thing that you're doing. And that's one of the most beautiful feelings I have ever experienced.
Yeah, and that's something that is very difficult to explain, very difficult to quantify, and very, very difficult to teach.
Yeah.
It's a self journey for every artist. And by the way, one thing I wanted to say on here, everybody should have some kind of creative output. Whether you think you're an artist or not, I think that there are people who are quote unquote artists who have a like me, for example. If I don't do some kind of creative output, I start to get depressed. And there's like, it's a crucial part of my life and my happiness. And I think that some people can deal without that, but at least maybe a little bit easier than I can. But I think that everybody should have some kind of creative output. And I think that humans are meant to create. That did you happen to listen to that podcast I sent you, the Anthropocene Reviewed?
Yeah, I did.
Which one did you listen to?
I listened to the one about cholera and Halley's Comet.
Halley's Comet. Yeah, I think that was the one that I suggested. But there's another one. Did you like it?
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. But he did one that was animated by Kurzgesagt, and he was talking about the I forget the exact name of the cave because I think it's in France, but it was this cave where these paintings were found that were like 30,000 years old.
I know which one you're talking about.
And he had a great line in that towards the end where he was like, every single person in this tribe, we know based on anthropological evidence, had to contribute to getting food, had to contribute to the safety of the group. And, you know, it was a difficult life. And yet they still found time to invent forms of art and perform them all over this cave. And he said, almost as if creativity is non-optional for humans.
Dude, I completely agree with that, man. I mean, like, creative energy that's half of existence.
Yeah.
If you think about the yin yang, like that's half of it. We have creation and destruction, basically. That's one of the spectra. And like and I think what people get caught on is like, creativity and art are related, but they're not synonymous. So you can create in so many different ways that don't require you to be an artist, that don't require you to play music or paint or write poetry or whatever. Like, you can create in so many different ways. You can create, like, you can do a podcast, you can build a table, you can put together a committee, or there's so many different ways to be creative that don't require you to like learn this new set of skills and put in like years. Because to be honest, a lot of these art forms, like, it takes a long time before you can really like get to the point, or not necessarily, but like, I mean, and my viewpoint is always changing on this, because it's always like, oh, I just need to get a little better and then I'll be able to, and that's part of the artistic mindset. That's part of the thing that drives us to become better. And that's totally okay, as long as we don't like get too identified with that kind of voice and that idea. But anyways, I just want to emphasize that, like, we can all be creative with the skills that we already have. We don't need to like embark on this insane odyssey to like just revolutionize our whole artistic and creative world. If you want to do that, go for it. Do it. I did it with music. I started playing a couple years ago, and it's completely changed my life. I picked it up in college, just picked up a guitar and started strumming around on it. It's completely changed my life. I am so grateful that I have embarked on this journey. I'm super stoked to share the stuff that I've been creating with all of you, and just like to really encourage the creativity, and like just I love seeing the unique creations that we can all produce when you send me your pictures of your paintings, and like if viewers send in their stuff, like I just love it. It's so beautiful to see. And I just
I'm
really
gonna have
want
an
to
email set
that.
up, by the way, guys. I'm gonna have a user email set up. I don't have it right now, but I will put it in the intro to this podcast. And yeah, we want to encourage people to send us their stuff, no matter what the quality is. I mean, Hank and I are very much learning. I think Hank's a little more advanced in his art than I am, but I would consider myself basically an amateur. But I don't like that word that much. Budding artist might be a better one. Something a little bit more positive. Amateur sounds kind of denigrating. But I think that any kind of artistic output is worth seeing for somebody. And even if it's just a symbol of this person taking his first little baby steps on what might be a long and beautiful journey. And that's what I see whenever I see like a young kid drawing something in high school or middle school or something, and suddenly being really proud of it. Even though it's not that good, it's really good for what they're expecting on their output.
Yeah.
And showing that, I might not be able to appreciate it that much artistically and aesthetically, but I can appreciate it sort of from the creative standpoint of like, oh, he's stepping out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long road, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah, and the end point is not what's important.
No.
Each step that we take, and just feeling each and every step, every little articulation of the joints in our feet, and just like, really zooming in on that process and really feeling that, because, this comes with a lot of frustration. It comes with a lot of doubt and judgment, and so many obstacles, so many opportunities to learn about ourselves and each other when we engage in these kind of activities. And it's all what makes it beautiful. Because if it was just fun, if it was just like mildly entertaining the whole time, it would, I mean, I don't want to say it wouldn't be worth it, but it wouldn't be nearly as fulfilling.
It really wouldn't. A big part of what makes art so satisfying is the struggle, is the challenge, is the improving yourself, is the simple fact that if it were easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
If you get good at something, then you know that you're in, the fraction of a percent of human beings on Earth that can do that.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool thing to think about, not getting a big head about it, but just thinking like, wow, I've conquered this mountain and looking for the next mountain to climb. But, it's even just making this podcast, I have been, for an example of why it's life-changing to do this sort of thing and why, it's so magical to me, is that once we started setting a deadline for this and we did our last couple of demo recordings and I was putting them together and figuring out some sound things, I had to learn a lot. I'm still learning, by the way, so if there's any sound issues, we'll work through them. But I've had to learn how to use Audacity and how kind of the basics of sound, and I'm still learning, and I'm excited to continue to learn. But I found myself, like, when I'm working, I'll just think about the podcast. I'll think about, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? What's our structure going to be? What's our topics going to be? And just do you remember when you were a kid and you had gotten like a new video game? And
oh, yeah.
You had to go to school and you had that feeling of like, oh my God, I cannot fucking wait till I get home and I can play that video game. I get that feeling now from my art whenever I've got a good project going. Like, I cannot fucking wait to get home and work on that thing.
That's beautiful.
And thankfully, the video game one is mostly fallen by the wayside. I still play video games now and then, but pretty much exclusively with friends.
Yeah, that's man, there's a lot of really great stuff in here to reflect on, I think.
Yeah.
Just, man.
Well, how about we transition here, segue, move on a little bit, because there is a lot in that.
Yeah, we'll probably.
And you and I could talk about that for hours. That might actually have to be a reoccurring segment.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff that we kind of introduce and touch on and talk about, like, they're topics that are so I don't want to expansive, exactly. I don't want to be like, oh, it's so deep, bro, but like there really is so much to unpack in these, and there's so many interesting things to think about. So we're going to keep coming back around to some of these concepts. If you guys have any things that you want us to talk about, or if you like, because again, I want to encourage, like, having people enter the conversation, because we're talking right now, but we would love to hear, other voices, even if it's in the form of an email or a painting or a little recording or whatever, to kind of expand this and, have this kind of ripple effect where the ripples are merging into each other and then creating new ripples and coming back, and then we can kind of reflect off of each other and learn that way. Because Nate and I have been talking with each other for a long time, and even though we've been able to see each other's blind spots and notice some things and help each other out in that way, that effect is even more substantial when it comes to like reflecting as mirrors, off of, strangers, people we don't know, and kind of connecting. That is super exciting
really
to me.
Different.
Yeah, exactly. People with different points of view.
You and I are really similar, so we rarely disagree on a subject, but another one of my friends, Will, who I'm actually going to have on the podcast. We're going to have some guests on the podcast. Hank and I have been very fortunate to have just some super interesting people in our lives. So we're definitely going to have some guests on. But one of them, Will, I mean, he and I have similar interests, but we are really, really different personality-wise, and we disagree all the fucking time. I mean, we'll even get into heated arguments sometimes. And I love that. I love that about him, and he and I have talked about it a lot, how awesome it is to have somebody. And I've known this guy since the 3rd grade, and we have been through a lot of tough times together. I care about him, I mean, so much. I really, really love this guy. And so we can openly disagree, and even to the point where we're getting a little mad. And still, there's no, like, we don't have to worry that, oh, he's not going to like me anymore. You know, that's not the kind of relationship we have. We know that no matter how upset we are in the moment, which we don't get that bad, but no matter how upset we get, we're just having a conversation. We know that we're different than each other. We know that we're going to disagree. That's just how it goes. And so it's very valuable to me to have people with different views and different personalities. And, you know, it's so easy these days to get into echo chambers, you know, where you're around all like-minded people. Nobody ever disagrees, and it's pretty much just, you know, I love the term, a circle jerk, you know?
Yeah. That can be fun, but it's, if there's not enough, like, diversity in views and mindsets, then it kind of just becomes like it just becomes a circular motion rather than this kind of upward spiraling motion that we talk about, where it's like, oh, I was in this exact same place, except now I feel like I have a more of a bird's eye view and like more of a big picture understanding of it. You know, when you get that feeling, like it's almost like a deja vu thing. It's like, wait a minute, I've been here before, but it's not just in a circle, because, you know, the experiences that I've had have led me to, it's deepened my understanding of this thing. And now I'm actually in the same place. Like, you know, if it was a 2-dimensional plane, it's like, oh, that's the same place, but it's actually 3-dimensional. And on the height axis, like, now you have this differential there. And that's like a super interesting feeling.
Yeah. I actually have that feeling living here in Florida, because, you know, I was homeless for a time whenever I was 17, and I had to move here to Florida. I actually stayed on Ian's couch for a while. That's where I finished up the school year, my junior year. But afterwards I moved to Florida for a little bit for the summer to live with my aunt. And I can remember just how depressed, that was 10 years ago. I was just so depressed. My life had just completely gone to shambles, and it was completely out of my control. Nothing that I could have done about it. Everything fell down around me. And I can remember just being in all this pain and not having, back then I didn't even know anything about art. I didn't start even attempting any kind of art until I was probably 23. But I can remember working at the restaurant that is right down the road, and staying at my aunt's place, which is right down the road from where I am now. And now here I am in the same spot, but I've spiraled upwards in a massive way. You know, just so many things. I'm still struggling with certain things, obviously. We all are. But I can, it's just, I'm barely even the same person as I was back then. And, that's 10 years and I was 17, so it's kind of a no-brainer. But even from when I was 23 and I moved here, it was 4 years ago. Yeah, I can barely even remember myself back then. Or maybe that's the wrong way to put it. I could barely recognize myself back then.
Right.
Very different. I hadn't started meditating. I hadn't started doing art. I was, in the wake of some really tough times, and I was depressed and just kind of miserable. And, it took a lot of effort. And I think that a lot of people get trapped in going in circles in that mode. And it took me a lot of effort to finally break out of that. But once I broke out of all that tough stuff, then I was able to start doing some more positive things. And that's really where the upward spiral began. I had to hit some really hard obstacles in order for me to have the desperation of, like, I got to find something. I got to do something here, or I might start going into a downward spiral.
Yeah. Yeah, this might be interesting. It might be interesting for us to kind of share a little bit more, maybe on some later podcasts about our some of the experiences we've had in our lives, just kind of sharing about that, because I know you and I have talked about that a lot, and I think it's been really beautiful to kind of be with you in this journey, because we've known each other since high school, and you started having to deal with a lot of this kind of shit long before then, and we all have weird stuff that we, family stuff and just kind of difficulties that we run into. But I think it might be valuable for us to kind of share a little bit about those things and how they've affected us, and how they've actually, because it always ends up being like, that is exactly what I needed to become the person that I am today in a certain way. And, we kind of need to endure suffering and pain and like all of this, and become attached, and like go through all of this trauma, and then get to the point where we're kind of ready to let it go and to learn what we needed to learn from that, and move forward, and then bring what we learned into the world, and help others who are struggling with the same thing if we can. And oftentimes even just talking about it and just being vulnerable and being open about it, it can, really, I think it can help for people who are struggling with similar things to, realize like, okay, I'm not alone in this. This is something that happens to people, and it's something that happened, but it doesn't make you, that doesn't, in the end, it doesn't make you who you are. It just gives you an opportunity to learn and to grow, like when you're ready. Yeah.
Wow. Man, we've been going deep on this first cut.
Yeah. This is,
I like it.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff we get into here on Casual Cognition.
Yeah. This is, Hank and I have a very wide variety of interests, and a lot of similar interests, but also a lot of different interests. So one of the things that we're going to do, as we mentioned before, is we're going to bring some reoccurring segments into it. We're going to try to talk a couple of topics, and, in the beginning, maybe some more current things. And we're going to wrap up the podcast with doing some reoccurring segments on some things that we just have talked about for years and end up coming back to it again and again. And it's just, there's too much, they're too juicy for one segment in one podcast. So, Hank, do you want to introduce the one today, since you talked to me about it yesterday?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So one of the segments that that we're going to be throwing in is it's basically an exploration of how science and spirituality are actually kind of beginning to merge. And there's still a lot of like polarization and a lot of rationalism versus more open-minded, subjective kind of thinking and all of that. And that's part of it, but kind of like exploring how, we have all of this, we have this library of ancient wisdom from various spiritual places, like we have, and they considered it science when they were kind of first created, like yoga and Ayurveda, for example. They were considered science, and it kind of was science for the tools that they had. However, obviously they didn't have the technology to zoom in with a microscope and look and find the mechanism and the name for every single thing. So what they ended up doing is they kind of used poetry, they used stories to explain these things so that the layperson could understand. Now, science...
Which is basically the origin of mythology.
Yeah. And, science is great. Science is amazing. We have learned so much crazy shit from science. It's super cool. But I don't think it's like, I don't know. It seems like people are either like rationalism, it's the thing that will solve everything, or like, oh, that's just a fucking waste of time, man. Just like be in the moment, go with the flow, and like you feel it. And
science-minded people do not like spirituality to get up into their world, and spiritual type people do not like science to get up into their world. They've always butted heads.
Yeah, so for all of you people who are hyper-identified with either of those, we decided to come in here and piss all of you off by showing how these things are actually starting to merge.
All of our viewers in this one first segment.
That's the thing, though, is they don't have to be mutually exclusive, and we're seeing more and more that they're actually kind of, it's becoming this corroboration and this like, oh, wait a minute. This story that they have told for thousands of years is actually being confirmed by our scientific method and added to,
or
like with more detail and with more mechanism and all of that. And that's great. That's super, super useful. But also I want to just point out like that some of these more, you could consider them romantic or like story-based systems for understanding these things, can be actually more useful in some context to like the layperson, because you don't need to understand all of the science behind it and all of the terms. And of course there are some terms, but they're usually more like general, like it's more of a like big picture kind of thing than really zooming in on the mechanism. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about for this segment was like, basically it was kind of this like aha moment that I had that kind of led me to start thinking more about this idea of science and spirituality kind of merging. And this is with something I found with with Ayurveda, which is like an ancient Indian holistic system for that's actually, how do you even explain that? I mean, it's related to,
it's basically plant medicine, and dietary preventative healing that was incorporated into the Vedic system of spirituality.
Nice. That was great, dude. That was really good. nice and concise. I was about to do some rambling, like half put together idea there, but that was great. So how Ayurveda and like nutritional science and biology are actually, in this case, I'll just give one example, how they're actually kind of agreeing with each other in a way, and how I saw and found this connection. So I was reading this book on Ayurveda by Dr. Vasant Lad, I think his name is, and it was just
some name.
Yeah, pretty cool name. But so
you know a lot of people with cool names over there.
Yeah, well, I don't think this guy's definitely not Swedish, but anyways, yeah, there's some cool Scandinavian names. We'll talk about that in another. No, just kidding.
Another reoccurring segment. Strange names from the north.
So yeah, okay. So I was reading this, and it was just like introducing the basic concepts of Ayurveda, and I came across these two terms, and I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation of the terms, but basically, so it was talking about, I came across the two terms. One was Ama, and the other one was Agni. And so in Ayurveda, they talk about, like, one of the things that they talk about is Agni, which is, if you translate it, it's the digestive fire. Mm-hmm. So this is a, right there, like, if you think about it, like, this isn't a one thing. This is a complex. The digestive fire, this is a combination of different aspects. And one of the things that they talk about is you want to keep your digestive fire, your Agni, you want to keep it alight. You want to keep it strong and free, basically. And one of the things that depresses the digestive fire is what's called Ama. And when I was reading it, I kind of just got this, like, I got a picture. I get this picture in my head that's like, okay, so you have this digestive fire, but then there's this other thing. Like, for example, if we're eating all the time, one of the byproducts is Ama. And it's like, I got this picture, like, it's this gunk. It's literally like gunk that's depressing and putting out the fire if there's too much gunk. Like, that's the way that I see it. But the thing is, I realized, like, wait a minute. Like, Agni, the digestive fire, like, that's the complex. That's hydrochloric acid. That's digestive enzymes. That's microbiota that are aiding in the digestive process. And Ama, that's toxins. Yeah. That's that's fungus. That's all of these things that are bogging down.
Whoa, don't be bashing fungus now.
Well, like, candida and like these different kinds of fungus that, of course, it can be, it's a natural integral part of the digestive system, but when it becomes unbalanced,
it can get out of balance.
And that is one of the things that happens if there is too much Ama. And like, so, if you're looking at it completely from a scientific perspective, you're like, okay, yeah, digestive fire, oh yeah, Ama, like, yeah, that's obviously bullshit. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's not that simple. But the thing is like, that is, it's just it's a practical way of understanding, and then they're connecting these ideas with how our diet affects those things. So they talk about, if you want to rekindle your digestive fire, fast. And that's been proven to increase, like, hydrochloric acid.
Stop eating.
Stop eating. That's been proven to improve gut, like the quality of your gut biome, and to improve in your digestion.
So it's kind of like, the terms seem very woo-woo, very bullshit. But what they're describing, what they're talking about is the prescription for this is legit.
Yes.
And so the connection you have to make is, these are thousands of years old. They didn't know what the fuck a microbiome was. They didn't know what, the gastrointestinal system really did.
Well, I think they did. I just think they couldn't
I'm just saying,
explain
like,
it in the
on
terms
on
that
a micro level.
Yeah, yeah.
Like on a microscopic level,
Yes,
they didn't
exactly.
quite get a lot of the things that we get now, but they got enough to create solutions for problems that came up. And then they used these spiritual, mythological terms that everybody would understand, like Agni, that would allow people to connect with it more and be more motivated to do it.
Yeah. And, also, like, I think one of the things that is really lost with, like, too much of a scientific approach, especially with things like diet, exercise, meditation, is, like, it loses the quality, which in some sense is the most important part, which is just the awareness. Like, how does it feel when I'm fasting? How does it feel when I eat a quinoa salad? Or how does it feel when I eat this In-N-Out burger with animal fries? Like, and just really taking the time to actually feel it. And this goes back to the thing that we talked about with consumption and production and that thing, because, like, so much of the time we are just inundated with stimulus. Like, we're eating, but we're just on our phone. Like, we're talking with somebody or thinking about something else. Like, not even noticing what we're putting in our bodies and how it makes us feel. And that is such a huge part of these, like, more spiritual, and I don't know if that's the right word, but,
it's a convenient term.
I'm just using it for convenience. We're not going to get into the semantics of all of this, but you get the idea. Like, it's not based on the scientific method. It's based on intuition and really feeling the body and, anecdotal evidence. And so in some ways,
not to mention hundreds, if not thousands of years of practice.
Yeah. And it's weird because I find myself, like, I love both ends of the spectrum, but I find myself feeling like I have to defend things like Ayurveda because, you have these terms like, oh, it's a pseudoscience. And I think a lot of people don't mean anything, like, bad with that, but there's kind of like this disdain that I hear when people use that term, like, oh, it's a pseudoscience. Like, it's just, and that's okay. That's fine. But, I don't know.
Meditation was considered a pseudoscience for a while, and now they're teaching it to corporations because they realize it increases productivity.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly why I wanted to have this as a segment, and this is why we have been coming back to this again and again. We're going to keep getting into this with different interesting examples. If you have any examples, send them in. We're super interested in hearing and learning more about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've got one thing to say about it, and then we probably need to wrap this thing up. We're getting close to an hour and a half, so. But I'd like to tie this all together with a nice bow and bring it all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to tell you a story from the Ramayana, which is a mythological book from, it was initially an oral tradition from India. And it was thought to have been written down, I think, beyond 500 BC, like between 500 and 1000 BC. So this is a, 3,000-year-old document. And there's this story in there where Rama, the main character, he's in the woods with his wife and his brother, and his wife, he's concerned about her because the woods are dangerous. There's demons in there and all kinds of dangers. And so he's talking about how he's got to bring his weapons around. And his wife says, Rama, please don't bring your weapons around. And Rama is like, why? I have to protect you. The woods are dangerous. I have to have my weapons. And she tells him a story. And the story goes, Indra, which was one of the main gods of the Hindu pantheon in that time period, is not really in there anymore. He, there was a holy man that Indra was starting to get a little concerned about. He was like, this guy's too holy. He's gonna, he's becoming, his purity is making him so powerful that he could overpower even me, the highest, the king of the gods. And so Indra comes up with this sneaky plan. He goes down to the holy man. The holy man says, "Oh, Lord Indra, I can't believe you're here," starts worshiping him. And Indra says, "Yes, I have a task for you. I need you to guard my sword." And, of course, the holy man is like, "Oh, of course, the king of the gods just asked me to guard his sword." So he's lugging around this sword with him, and he ends up carrying it around for a long time. Indra just goes away, doesn't come back to him. And he doesn't tell him how long he needs to carry this thing around, just that he needs to carry it around all the time. So he's bathing with it, he's eating with it next to him, he's got it on his person or next to him at all times for weeks, if not months. And suddenly he ends up running into I forget exactly what it is, and it's probably different depending on the translation, but it was like a burglar or a highwayman kind of thing, and he was attacking some couple. And the holy man gets enraged by it, and he runs up and he stabs the dude with the sword, and he kills him. And that was the thing that knocked him down a notch on the purity level. He was no longer a pure holy man because he had just murdered somebody. He'd just taken a life. Even though it was it was in good intentions, he still he enacted violence on somebody else, which in that tradition is holy man, you're never to commit violence on somebody, even if they're going to kill you. And that's for the Kshatriya caste, the warrior caste. And then, Indra comes down and laughs and takes his sword back. He's like, "Yeah, you're no longer a threat to me. I'll take that sword back now." And the lesson there, and what I was going to tie it back to, is when you are carrying around a weapon all the time, you start to think of yourself as a warrior, and you start to think that you need to use that weapon. And you start to get more comfortable with the concept of using that weapon. And, you were talking about the difference between the Swedish and the American police. I think that that's one of the biggest differences, is that the American police are carrying around these weapons all the time, and they are very comfortable with the idea of using them. And I think it's very telling how often, they've got tasers, they've got mace, they've got batons, they've got all these different things, but so often they just reach for that pistol because that's their weapon. And when people are armed for war and put into police the general population, they start to see the general population as an enemy, not as somebody they're serving. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. So, once again, wisdom from 2,500, 3,000 years ago is coming back, and now we're seeing it in full view. And that makes me think that these sort of things these issues have been around for a long time. And, we've made a lot of progress in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways we're the same that we've always been. We're the same we've been for thousands and thousands of years. And so when you're looking at these ancient texts and these ancient sciences, we have to remember that they weren't some caveman. They weren't less than us. They weren't less intelligent than us. They're the same people the same kind of human being, and to dismiss what they've observed over thousands of years, and to dismiss what they have given us through these ancient texts and through these, traditions, I think is to make a tragic mistake. And you're basically stepping off of the shoulders of the giants that you were born on.
There you have it, folks.
There you have it.
I think that's a good place to end.
We're going to end it there. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.
All right, there you have it. First one down, many more to come. Once again, y'all, that user email is casualcognitioncast@gmail.com, and we will see you in 2 weeks.